Hello fellow cyborgs and welcome to my 2018 wrap up. I'm going to give you a lot of stats about how many books got what number of stars, how many books I hauled, how many books I purchased, how much money I spent on my books, and other things, how many things I DNF, stuff like that. So if you're into numbers, hang around, but first to start, I want to show you the last 3 books that I finished in the year of 2018. The Dragonfly Pool was the last Eva Ibbotson I had on my shelves, though I have not finished her bibliography. This is a purely historical children's middle grade book that takes place during the beginning of World War II. We follow Tally as she is sent to a very progressive boarding school, makes friends, and then becomes obsessed with the Kingdom of Burgania after she sees a newsreel in front of a movie showing the King of Burgania standing up to Hitler and his Nazis. The last 2 Ibbotsons that I read were purely realistic novels, and I find that I enjoy her more magical novels a whole lot more than her realistic ones. This was definitely solid 3 stars, and I found the plot was more cohesive than in The Journey to River Sea, which was the other Ibbotson I read this year, but overall I enjoy her Witch and The Secret of Platform 13, and of course The Island of the Aunts so much better than these ones geared solely in real life and history. So definitely not a bad book, but I will definitely be focusing on Ibbotson's magical stuff in the future. Vacation, I finished Buddy reading Clay's Arc. This is another Octavia Butler. This is technically number 3 in the Pattern Master series, but I felt that I could fully appreciate this as a story in and of itself and didn't feel like I was missing anything for not having read the first 2 books in the series. This is about an extraterrestrial microbe that takes over astronauts, a crew of astronauts. One of them makes it back to Earth and then has to kind of reconcile his own desire to keep the human race free of this microbe and the microbe's desire to spread and spread and spread. This is kind of also a post-apocalyptic novel because in this future, the cities are these horrid slums where there are people out to kidnap you and gang rape you and mutilate you, and I don't like post-apocalyptic stories because of that. This got so incredibly dark and violent in ways that I, for some reason, wasn't expecting. So I couldn't say that this was a particularly enjoyable read, to say the least, but it's Butler. The ideas were intriguing. It was easy to read, fast-paced, and I will be reading this whole series eventually. And the final read of 2018 was finishing The Collected Lyrics by Edna St. Vincent Millay. These are 270 pages of various poems that she's written in various collections. I really enjoyed this. This got 4 out of 5 stars from me. There were so many poems in here that moved me so much. One made me cry. She talks about death and grief. She also plays a lot with divinity versus nature and really captures her nature descriptions really beautifully. There are also some love poems in here, and I found that her long narrative poems were actually the ones that affected me the most, even though a long narrative poem was the reason why I hadn't read this since graduating college, that I've had this on my shelves for years and years and years, because I feel like I'm a short poem person, but maybe not so much in the case of Edna St. Vincent Millay. So super enjoyable. I hope to spotlight this and some of the other poetry collections I read this last year a little bit more coming up this year, so that you get a taste of what those collections look like rather than, just me telling you how I enjoyed them. You get to experience some of the poems yourself. So with those last 3 books under my reader's belt, I managed to read 118 books, says Goodreads. I DNF'd 15 things, which was about twice as much as last year, but I'm pretty okay with that. So before I get into any more specifics on the DNFs, because I have some more stats for you, let's talk about what do I want to start with? Let's talk about the books I hauled. So this year in 2018, last year in 2018, I hauled a total of 56 books. 25 of those I purchased myself and 31 were gifts. As I said, my total read count was 118 things. And here's the breakdown of what I read for what year they were hauled, if that makes sense. I read 33 things that I hauled in 2018, 25 things I hauled in 2017, 12 things from 2016 and 2 things from 2015 or earlier, though I think this number is a bit sketchy. So I think what these numbers say, because I hauled a lot more things in 2015 and 2016, though I have had more years to read them, is that I am more interested in reading the new books I acquire than I am of reading the old books I acquire, especially if you think about the fact that pre-Christmas, I had 16 less books that I had hauled, so I think there were only 40 books for me to have read from in 2018 pre-Christmas, which means I read almost all of the books that I hauled in 2018 before Christmas. So I was just very much into reading what I purchased immediately. While we're on the same vein, let's talk about the DNF. So I told you I DNF'd 15 total titles. These were the books I attempted to read, got part of the way through, and said, I'm not going to spend my time reading this. It was either because I wasn't enjoying it or figured it would at best be 3 stars. And let me tell you, I've had too many 3 stars in the last 2 years. So I also kept track of not only the books I DNF'd, but the books I unhauled without even attempting. I had just completely lost interest in them for one reason or another. And I kept track of which years had the most unhauls. So again, these stats are unhauls and DNFs, but I DNF/unhauled 0 books that I acquired in 2018, which makes sense. 7 books that were acquired in 2017, 23 that were acquired in 2016, and then 1 that were from pre-2015. And for me, what these stats say is that the longer a book has stayed on my shelves, and I haven't read it, but I also haven't unhauled it, there's a greater likelihood that those books from like pre-2015 are going to stick around because I definitely want to read them, or they were a special purchase, but the time has just not come, but I'm not going to give up on them. So it's almost like they've stayed so long that they've dug their heels in. However, that is totally the opposite of books from just like 2 years previous. So the books in 2016, I was merciless in just getting rid of because I no longer cared about the specific title or the specific genre that I decided to buy 17 things in, even though I was new to it or whatever. So 23 things were either DNF'd and or unhauled from 2016. So this tells me that I really just need to read the books that I buy immediately. And that needs to be the way that I acquire books, is that I'm interested in X niche thing. I acquire books, I read them, and I'm excited for them right then. So let's go back to the books that were purchased. So I hauled 56 things in 2018, 31 of those were gifts, which means that 25 I purchased myself. In total, I spent $281 on those 25 books, which is slightly higher than last year. Last year, I purchased 28 things for myself. This year, it was 25. And last year, I spent $274 on those 28 books. This year, I spent $281 on 25. So I was buying more expensive books this year, and I'm okay with that because I was also buying less. So on average this year, I paid $11.24 per book that I purchased. Last year, it was $9.79. Okay, so let's talk about star ratings because this depressed me quite a bit. So let me give you this year's numbers and then I'll talk to you a little bit about last year's numbers. So this year I rated 2 books 1 star. I rated 29 books 2 stars. A lot of those were DNFs, but yikes. 55 books got 3 stars from me, which is depressing. There were 30 4-star reads, which is pretty darn good, but only 2 5 stars. I hate that number so much. I hate that I only loved 2 books this year. I feel like that is the most depressing thing. That really upsets me. Last year, I had 12 5-star reads and 15 4-star reads, but 12 out of those 27 4 and 5 stars were rereads. And I was like griping about that last year, but that means that last year I read 15 new things that were 4 and 5 stars. And specifically, there were 5 5-stars last year. This year, there are 2 5 stars. So anyway, moving on. I think those are all of, I've got a couple more stats for you. This year, I reread 4 things. Last year, I reread 12. This year, of the things I read, 17 were read through the audio. They were audiobook reads. Last year it was 16, so comparable. And then as far as borrowing from the library, 7 this year, 7 last year. So last year and this year were very, very similar. It seems like the Zero by project, which we're not at 0 yet, but that's okay. that the Zero by project kind of encourages me to have specific sort of buying habits and creates specific sort of reading conditions where DNFs are aplenty and a lot of 3-star books are being read. And I think, again, the problem is that a lot of the books that are getting 3 stars are books that I'm kind of still interested in, but not like super excited. A book can have like basic merit, but I think the attitude you approach something with will matter a lot in your overall experience of reading. It matters to me, at least, and a lot of these books were burdenous the last 2 years. So 0 by 19. I did not succeed. However, it was much, much more of a success this year. This time last year, I had 111 things on my physical TBR. Today, I have 38. Even better news, the state of my physical TBR, if we're counting things that were not hauled at Christmas, was 21. That is pretty darn good. That is pretty good. Getting from 111 down to 21, and then it just kind of get bumps up from all of the nice gifts I got for Christmas time. That is pretty fantastic. So I have 38 books that I need to read in 2019, which is a spoiler for one of my 2019 goals, which is a completely different video. So for now, I'm going to sign off. I look forward to seeing my face in my best books of 2018 video and my goals of 2019 video. Until next time, I hope that you are patting yourself on the back for one reason or another and continue to be lovely. And becomes obsessed with the kingdom of Bergania. Stats about how